Someone make it make sense.
Probably a couple.
All right, Mary, I couldn't have said it better. Boy, what a Monday. Monday indeed. So guys, wow. Welcome to everybody who's here. Thanks for being here. I know there's been a ton of people, I'm sure, going live and talking about this. Welcome, Bunny Murphy. Welcome, Flash. Welcome, Mary, if I didn't already say that. What a day. What a day. What a day. So yeah. First thing I want to say is this. So Nate Eaton has interviewed Lori Vallow in an unedited interview, and we are going to be redirecting from this into that. So for anybody who's like, wait a second, we are missing the Lori Vallow, not to worry. We will, it's a good portion of it has already been aired, but we will redirect into that. Now, here's what I was thinking, right? What I was thinking is that I knew that we were going to want to talk about what happened today with Bryan Kohberger. And instead of starting the Lori Vallow stream and then talking about Kohberger for however long, I figured, let me just make a separate stream so we can talk about everything, and then we'll redirect into Lori afterwards. So there we go. What a day, guys. So yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. First of all, here's what I want to say is that this has been reported on by all of the media. Now, for me, as you guys well know, here's the thing. Looking at the docket here, right? Like, just take a look. The most recent filings we have are in regards to the juror questionnaire, okay? Then, if we go to the current case summary, which will load here in a second, hopefully. Let's take a look at that. Flash says this was different. What was different? Lots was different, definitely, but what specifically are you referencing? So I'm just waiting for this case summary to load. I don't know why it's taking so long. But the other thing is this too, right? Like, in addition to just taking a look at this docket, which if it'll load, the other thing is that, just today they had that hearing in Pennsylvania about the defense witnesses, which, seem to be like they're going to be, they would have been mitigation witnesses, right? And they were talking about like the subpoenas and all that. And like, there were already plans, like, for further hearings on this matter for the jurors or not jurors. Oh my God, the witnesses in Pennsylvania and in other states and whatever. And it's like, one thing that is so interesting to me is the timing of this. Okay, so here's the case summary. So let's go to this. And we go to the case summary, right? So we had another thing that initially didn't say sealed. This is new because earlier today, this didn't say sealed. The sheriff's return, that was the latest thing, right? And then we have another filing in regards to the juror questionnaire, right? Another sealed filing of the jurors questionnaire. And then we have, this hearing is canceled. That had already been the case, right? Now we have on the docket 7/28, right? Is the next hearing on the case summary. And then and then look, we have voir dire, and look, jury trial, August 18th. So where this case was postured, right? The posture here was headed for trial, as you guys know, right? But especially in terms of not just headed for trial, but on the same day of having, had a hearing for out-of-state witnesses, and submitting more filings regarding the jury questionnaire. It is interesting timing. And I just wanted to reiterate, there's nothing on the record that reflects anything that has been reported. What's been reported is that there was a plea. What's been reported is that there's a hearing on July 2nd in regards to the plea. I don't know where this is coming from. Now, I don't know everything, right? So it doesn't mean, but I'm just saying, it's not, if one were to just not pay attention to the media and just look at the docket and look at the case summary, and one would have no clue, right? So there's that. Welcome, Kat Randall. Welcome, Heather. Welcome, Amelia Outlaw. Love it. Happy to see all of you guys. So it's interesting. Now, here's one thing I will say, right? In terms of a plea, it's not like I would expect to look at the docket, right? I wouldn't expect to look at the docket and for it to be like, plea deal. Like, that's not what I would expect. But at the very least, right, this hearing that is apparently scheduled for the day after tomorrow, like, I would expect that to be on the docket, right? Because that's a hearing. It wouldn't even have to say what it's about. It could just say status conference, right? Or whatever. And it could even be sealed. But in other words, my point is this: there's been no changes whatsoever at all to any of it, Even being vague, even, there's been no changes, no additions to, nothing has changed. So there's that. How would the media know? I heard, and this is what I hate, right? I heard from somebody else who said it somewhere. I don't even remember what channel. It was like, I've just had YouTube on in the background as I was driving home from work and like doing things. Apparently the story goes that one of the victims' families told the media. I mean, but you guys know how I am. It's just, I don't know. It's just one of those things, right? And then it's just the game of telephone, and everybody's like, well, it's been verified. And then it's like, oh, it's been verified. I haven't seen it. I haven't seen anything. It's just hearsay, basically, right? Essentially, grapevine. It's grapevine. Could it be true? Yes. As everyone's saying, it's true. Yes. I'm just like saying to myself, why are we not seeing anything? And why are the things that we're seeing still posturing towards trial? That's all I'm saying. I mean, it's just a bit odd because do we have anything hard, like solid to go off of? I don't know. So yeah, it's a bit odd, but you know what? It's the elephant in the room, as it were, or what have you. And I don't want it to distract from Lori's interview, which we're going to be redirecting into after this, like I said. So we're going to talk about it just in case it's true, right? Because I wanted to put all that out there, as in it's not been verified at all, right? Like, it's not, you guys know how it is, right? Those of us who follow these cases and rely on the court record and the public record instead of rumors, literally, again, you would have no idea looking at this. So, all that being said, if it's true, let's go ahead and talk about it so that when we get to Lori, we can focus on that insanity, complete different insanity. So it's not been 5 years, but the Flash, we're going to talk about why it's actually not so weird, because oftentimes when pleas are negotiated or when a defendant decides to plea, it's when they're almost to trial, right? When it's like they're running out of options. So the timing of it isn't weird to me in terms of almost at trial. The thing that's weird timing wise to me is like on the day of having her had all these hearings, or the hearing in Pennsylvania in preparation for bringing in witnesses for the defense, right? It's like, it's just odd that it could fall on, if it did, right, that it could fall on that same day when it's like they're lining up people from out of state to come in to support the defense. It's just a bit weird of all the days. Like maybe yesterday or maybe tomorrow would be less weird to me. So, okay. First of all, here's what I wanted to say. If you're his defense team, and if you're Bryan Kohberger for that matter, regardless of what you did or didn't do, or what anybody thinks you did or doesn't think you did, or whatever, if you're facing a death penalty case, and we've said this all along, the goal is to get the death penalty off the table. Now, let's put this into perspective, right? Let's put this into perspective. All these filings that we've talked about, right? Even all these strategies, even with the leaks, right? Even with the leaks, well, at least for me, what have I said, right? That the whole thing with the leaks and then asking to continue the trial, what I said was, I thought this is actually a strategy to get the death penalty off the table, to say, hey, Judge Hippler, you get to choose. Either you continue it or we go to trial. And I mean, they even said so much in their filings, right? They were like, if the state wants to go to trial, then it's their choice. But like, it's completely different when you have all the duties that you have as a death penalty counsel and all this and that, right? In other words, like, and then of course the mitigation phase, like they were essentially saying, like, look, state, if you really want to go to trial as scheduled, you can just take death penalty off the table. That was what they were aiming for. In my mind, everything that they've done so far, and as they should, this is normal in a death penalty case, right? regardless of if you think your client is guilty or innocent, the first and foremost thing you have to work towards is getting rid of that death penalty. That's it. That is the priority. That's the priority. So everything that they've been doing so far has been, first and foremost, to try to save his life, right? And then second from that, you could say, right, would be putting on a strong case, right? Or poking holes in the state's case, whatever their strategy would be at trial in terms of the guilt phase. But that death penalty, getting that off the table comes first. So when you think about that, right? When you think about the fact that that has always been their goal, first and foremost, here's what I have to say, is that in the end, they've succeeded in their goal. Now, that's separate and apart from whether he, again, one thing at a time, the goal being to get the death penalty off the table by whatever means necessary, they've achieved that. When I say they, I don't know if it was, we don't know the circumstances, right? If it was whatever, but nonetheless, I will say this much, right? To the extent that you can say that the defense achieved it, they have cast enough doubt in the minds of the prosecutors that the state was willing to make this deal. And that's a whole other topic or a whole other branch to this whole thing. But the first thing I wanted to start with is, with their first priority being to get the death penalty off the table, if in fact this plea deal is legit and that's what's going to happen and he's going to have life in prison, then they've succeeded because the death penalty is off the table. So that's the first thing I was going to say. And the thing too, and welcome DP, happy to see you. I had heard, again, I hate this shit because it's just fucking rumor, right? And I don't subscribe to this stuff. But I thought the word on the street was that the families didn't know, right? Because part of what I've been thinking about has been based on whether or not the families knew or not. So let me know what you guys, again, I hate this because it's just the game of telephone. But my understanding was that the families were caught off guard and they did not know. So, yeah, he was going to be waiving any appellate issues as part of this. Right. And that's right. That's exactly right, because they would have rather the judge have taken the death penalty off the table or the state have decided not to pursue it. But this is the next best option. It seems like the families are actually saying they are upset at the death penalty offer. What? Death penalty? You mean not death penalty offer? So my understanding, again, this is just from the media, is that instead of being consulted ahead of time, okay, so let me just break this down in my understanding, right? Normally what you would have in any case, criminal case, where there could be a potential plea deal in the works, right? Normally what will happen is the state will consult the victim's family members. Now, they may not go with what the victim's family members want, but they normally talk to them first. And the reason I want to mention that is because if you look at, there's certain cases, right? There's certain cases where the victim's families actually want leniency. There's certain cases where the death penalty is on the table or life without parole is on the table, and the victim's families are consulted and they say, we don't want that. We think they should have a lesser sentence. Or it could go the other way. They could say, hey, we are thinking about negotiating for life and taking death penalty off the table. And they could say, no, we want death penalty, da, da, da. It could go either way. And especially when you've got different families, like in this case, right, 4 different families, they could all want different things. But we have covered trials on this channel, and I've also seen other trials where the victims' families come out and they are showing forgiveness, and they actually are begging the state to not give the max sentence. So the state typically, if there's going to be a plea deal, they will consult the victims' families. Now, they don't have to go with what they want, but it is really unusual for them to not tell them it's happening at the very least. Like, even if they aren't going to ask them for an opinion, it's really unusual for them to just not even tell them it's happening, right? That is something that's odd. And so my understanding was like that the families were blindsided. That was my understanding from God only knows what the reporting, again, I'm not, whatever. It's all we've got at the moment, right? So yeah. So if that's what you mean, DB, that's what my understanding is as well. And so here's the thing, right? Like, had the state, if this is all true, right, and they didn't consult the families ahead of time and they didn't give them a heads up at least, then you have to wonder, because everything that we've heard in this case, right, is like that the families were all very much for the death penalty. And you have to wonder, the first thing I thought to myself was, I wonder if they didn't consult the family, because if they consulted the family would have made it very, 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 very clear that they want the death penalty. And then the state would have to proceed. Because the only reason the state makes a deal like this, first of all, the only reason the state would make a deal like this, but second of all, not even say anything to the families, right? You know what I mean? It's like plausible deniability. This is my opinion on what we have so far, right? The reason would be so that you can make this deal without having to be like, oh, we heard what the families had to say and then we decided to go against it, right? Because the thing is that I kind of view this as a game of chicken, where both sides are playing chicken. So, and again, as far as the state's concerned, I think that is kind of evident in the fact that if it's true that they did not consult the victims first or even give them a heads up, right? That's almost like ask for forgiveness, not permission type thing. And that's unusual. And then, of course, with the defense not wanting to risk the death penalty with a jury trial. Do you guys see what I mean with the game of chicken? Like, and we can talk more about this. This is just my initial thoughts. Like, when I first heard about this, I was like, oh my God, both sides don't have confidence in their case. If the state was sure that they could secure a guilty verdict and the death penalty, this wouldn't be happening. They have no reason. There's no reason for them to accept this deal if in fact this is happening. There's no incentive for them to do that. It's not going to be out of the goodness of their hearts. It's only because they're not sure in their case. They're not 100%. Right? So yeah. And then what does my handwriting say here? And the thing is if you're the defense, right, if an acquittal is almost nearly impossible, the best option and the best outcome for you would be life without parole. Now, here's what I want you guys to think about. Compare this to Delphi, where we all got a verdict that felt very, what's the right word? Hope. It gave a lot of us hope in the jury system, right, with Karen Reed. But think back to Delphi. And think what they had. Well, sorry, let me rephrase that. Think what they didn't have on Richard Allen, right? I will just say, this is my personal opinion, that had that been a death penalty case, I feel pretty certain that that jury would have given him the death penalty. And DB, if you're still listening, because I know that's like your main case, let me know what you think. I would have thought, I feel very confident that jury in Delphi would have given him the death penalty. And it's kind of akin to like what we heard from the first jury in Karen Reed, where it's like this one thing and then a bunch of leaps, logical leaps or whatever, and like skipping all the middle part, and then like ends up in this conclusion, but like you're missing all the connectors, right? Type of thing. And that's really, I think, putting it kind of nicely. And so what I'm thinking about in terms of Bryan Kohberger, I think if you're his defense team, and we've heard a lot of people talk about this, right? The scary part, if you're Bryan Kohberger or if you're his defense going to a jury trial, is that gosh darn knife sheath. Because we know that if jurors think critically and they look at it and they look at the circumstantial elements of it, there's a million reasons why that shouldn't be enough. But we also know that for some jurors, that will be enough. And they are not even to hear the rest of it. They hear knife sheath, DNA on the knife, and then they're done, right? And it's almost like you have to try to figure out, like, how much faith do you put in the jury, right? That you don't know yet. How much faith do you put in people that they will think critically? Honestly, like the way that the jury did in this Karen Reed retrial, right? But if you compare that jury to, for example, to the jury in Delphi, you have two completely different juries, in my opinion. And if you were to say, okay, what if you're Bryan Kohberger's team and you're like, what if we got a jury like the jury in Delphi? Yeah, you want to do a plea deal. There's because again, I feel very confident that they would convict and they would go with the death penalty, right? So I think that both sides, and then the state would not be, if this is happening, the state would not be doing this if they thought for sure they could secure the guilty verdict and with the death penalty. I think the death penalty being key. I think that they feel like they wouldn't want to get a guilty verdict and then have a jury choose life. I think that they would rather not. I think they would rather take the coward way out and say, okay, it's life without parole, and we didn't give a jury the chance to tell us that our case wasn't adequate. You know what I mean? Especially being so high profile. So that's sort of my initial thoughts on it. I have a lot more thoughts, but that's sort of the overall. They could float it as a rumor. I guess so. I mean, I don't know. It is, it's crazy that this seems to be legitimate and so many people have said it's legitimate, but yeah, I mean, we don't have anything to verify that, So like, again, here's the case summary. I mean, it's just like, okay, I mean, I don't know. But yeah, so I think that if this is true, if this plea deal is true, I think it says a lot about how the state feels about their case and all the holes, right? And so to think of it this way, right? It's like, okay, well, so if the state's like even almost, I mean, not verbatim, not verbally, right? But if the state is conceding by accepting this deal, if the state's recognizing that there's all these holes in their case, right? And then it's like, well, if you're the defendant, you might be like, oh, well, then yeah, duh, we should take it to trial because even the state can see there's all these holes. I think that the difference is if you knew that if they could go to trial with a guarantee, this is in a hypothetical world, if they could go to trial with a guarantee that they could have like a Karen Reed jury, and by that I mean the second time around, the retrial, if they could go to trial with a guarantee that they had that jury, it might be different. But if they go to trial and then it's like a guarantee you're going to get a Delphi jury, and it's just such a risk. It's just such a risk. And that's the shame in it, right? Because it's like, again, given the fact that the state is clearly conceding that their case has problems, you would hope that if you're a defendant, that means, you know what, a jury trial is the way to go. And, if it wasn't a death penalty case, if it was just like the capital max was life without parole, maybe it would be completely different, maybe, right? If it's like, okay, yeah, life without parole versus like life with parole or whatever. But the thing is, I have to just come back to this to help ourselves all feel like something happened that was not the worst thing, which is this. All along, their goal, as in the defense, has been to save his life and to get the death penalty off the table. And if this plea is legit, that has happened. And that's that, right? So Brian Enton, thank you. And also welcome back, Truth and Justice, True Crime with Anna. Brian Enton posted that he's going to fly to Idaho. The hearing is Wednesday. Right. And again, it's just odd though that, again, that's not on the docket yet. It's just a bit weird, but apparently this is happening. I just don't know why it's not on the docket yet. So I wonder if Twiz is going to endeavor to be at that hearing. I bet he is. So anyway, so those are some of my thoughts on this. And, yeah, we will continue the conversation. But for now, it is time to redirect into Lori Vallow. Don't apologize for driving. Got to be safe. Safety first, right? So yeah, this should redirect you guys into the next stream. We're going to be watching Nate Eaton's interview with Lori Vallow. And so, yeah, so I'll see you guys on the other side.